So, Ryan,
Hi, Kathy.
we are here to talk about play today, and I had a question for you. What did you play when you were a kid?
I'm sure I did all sorts of things, but
Mm-hmm.
because I just got one for my own son, I've been having a very specific memory of play lately, and that is the wonder of a new refrigerator box. I mean, it was the kind of excitement when we would have a box like that. I can still feel it today, and I see it in my own son. Greg Bear, who normally co-hosts this show, this Christmas, he gave me a box about that size, and it overshadowed for my young son all the gifts that my wife and I bought him. He plays with it to this day. He's been coloring inside it. He's been knocking it over, and I just can't believe how many hours of fun he's gotten out of this simple cardboard box. And I was the same way. What about you, Kathy? Kathy, how did you play when you were a kid?
Oh my God. Well, I actually did a lot with cardboard boxes, and I still remember that one time when I was about 8, I thought it would be really cool to build my own mini bowling alley and to see if I could get the ball to return like it did in a real bowling alley. So I took like a refrigerator carton and then I played with the angles of all the little pieces inside. And finally I got the ball to come back and I was so excited I invited the whole neighborhood to go bowling with me in my cardboard box.
So parents, if you're listening, if you want your child to grow up to be a world-famous academic, make sure that they're looking at the angles and they're playing with the box in all sorts of special ways. We have a guest host on the show, and that is Kathy Hirsh-Pasek. If you've listened to the show before, you've met her. She was with us in Season 5 to talk about making everyday spaces more playful. And we're going to come back to that idea in a big way later on in this program. If you've read the book that I co-authored with Greg, who gave me the box, you've also met Kathy, or at least you know her work, because our work really was influenced by a book that Kathy co-authored called Becoming Brilliant. Kathy is also the co-author of a book called Einstein Never Used Flashcards, How Our Children Really Learn and Why They Need to Play More and Memorize Less, another book that lots of our listeners are probably familiar with. She is the Stanley and Deborah Lefkowitz Professor of Psychology at Temple University, where she directs the Infant Language Laboratory. And she's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, the American Psychological Association, the American Educational Research Society, and elsewhere. She's published 17 books, more than 250 articles on learning and child development, on parenting, and yes, on play. The latest book she co-wrote is Making Schools Work, bringing the science of learning to joyful classroom practice, which is the first education book co-written with teachers, administrators, and scientists. And I keep mentioning that Kathy co-wrote these books with someone. And today, Kathy, we have a very special guest, don't we?
We have the person who's the co in the co-wrote. My buddy Roberta Golinkoff and I have been working together for...
Don't tell him. Don't tell him.
Okay. Ready, Roberta? We've been working for years.
Yes.
And it has been absolutely amazing. So pretty much everything on my bio, Roberta has done or bettered me on. And we have been playing together. I mean,
For
no
a long
kidding.
time. Yeah.
It's been a heck of a lot of fun.
And to show
has.
just how closely they work together, Roberta and Kathy share a Twitter handle.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. Kathy and Row 1. That's it.
So we are so happy to have Roberta Golinkoff, who is the Unidel H. Rodney Sharp Chair and Professor in the School of Education at the University of Delaware. She holds joint appointments there in the departments of Psychological and Brain Sciences and Linguistics and Cognitive Science. She's the founder and director of the Child's Play, Learning and Development Lab, and the co-author with Kathy of several wonderful books. Roberta and Kathy also co-founded the Ultimate Block Party movement to celebrate the science of learning and play. She also co-founded the Playful Learning Landscapes Initiative to transform cities into playful learning centers for children to prepare them for success in a global world. Roberta, thank you so much for being here. We're so happy to have you. Welcome to Remaking Tomorrow.
Thank you.
So you two know each other so well. I just want to give our listeners a sense. How did you two get to know each other? And how did you get to become these lifelong productive collaborators?
Well, it's 19. We had a conference at the University of Delaware on the origins and growth of communication. So I was already an assistant professor, and we selected Kathy to be a junior scholar in that Origins and Growth of Communication Institute for 6 weeks. They lived in the dorms here at the University of Delaware. So that's how I first got to know her. And then I did a sabbatical at Penn for a year, and Kathy was just finishing up and she was still there. And we had this crazy idea to develop a way to see what kids understood about language by showing them 2 images and seeing if they could look at the one that we named. Like imagine a car and a shoe on a screen. We said, where's the car? Find the car. And kids could actually look at the car more than the shoe if they knew the word.
And I should tell you, this thing that we invented for language learning, it was with kids who couldn't talk yet. So it was one of the first times that we got to peer into the head of a child who wasn't talking and understand what they knew about language, it was just amazing. It was such an eye-opener.
That was it. From then on, it's been, 1,000 publications. I don't know. But we learned that we worked really well together. And my life would be a whole different story if Kathy Hirsh-Pasek had not entered it.
So Roberta, after all these years, what is it about play? Like everyone's talking about it right now. We just had, UNESCO comes out with the Happy Schools report, and the OECD in Europe is like, oh, well, we really need to do things with well-being and have play.
Yes.
Now, it used to be a dirty word when we started, but now, what's the scoop? Why is everybody talking about it?
So one of the things is we're in a mental health crisis, which has been established now. I think kids were not in good shape even before COVID because they were experiencing a lot of pressure in school. I think social media, when used to excess, is a problem for kids and families. And we know that schools were not producing children who really love to learn. Why go to school if it's all drill and kill? And how are you going to make those breakthroughs? We have so many problems in the world. I don't want to get into a doom and gloom here, but oh my God, do we have problems? We need people who can think creatively, who have the confidence to pursue things if they fail the first time, who understand how to communicate with others, who understand the importance of creativity and critical thinking and problem solving, and of course, collaboration. Kathy, I just snuck in the 6 C's.
I could tell that's what you were doing. So wait a minute, Roberta, I just want to get this. Are you trying to tell everybody out there that if they play and they play well, that actually they're learning a whole suite of other skills that are going to be important for them to thrive in the 21st century?
You took the words out of my very mouth.
So what are those skills again?
It starts with collaboration. You learn that there are others in the world with whom you have to work. How are you going to do that? You're going to do that through communication. But communication isn't just learning to talk, although that's pretty essential. It's also learning how to write and speak persuasively. And Kathy, we could say this one together. Listening. Right?
Nobody listens anymore.
Exactly. And content, children have to have the things that we teach in school, although our pedagogy needs vast improvement for the vast majority of children around the world, where we're still emphasizing drill and kill. No good. Children need to have critical thinking. There should be no question that is off the table when children ask it. If you limit the kinds of conversations you're willing to have with kids, don't expect them to come back to you when they're adolescents and they really have serious questions that they're afraid to ask you. We need to have confidence, the ability to fail and learn from it and keep going. Talk to any entrepreneur. They will tell you their first venture sunk like a rock. But they figured out what they needed to do, and they kept going. So these are the C's that children, We need these skills. And in our book, Becoming Brilliant, we talked about all the times that adults fail to manifest these skills.
So we've been working really hard, especially in making schools work, to find a new way to make teaching interesting again for teachers. I mean, teachers go into teaching because they are wonderful human beings who care about kids.
Yep.
And when the teachers don't love it, well, the kids don't feel so motivated either.
So what does play, or what can play, look like in a classroom or in a formal education setting? Like when I think of play in schools, I think of recess. I think of maybe messing around in the hallways if you're lucky.
We can't have that dichotomy, that all we see is play in the hallways, and in schools, kids have their head down and they're working.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make a combination concept. You could call it plurning, as someone told us in one of our first talks. Remember that we gave in DC,
I do.
What a brilliant word, and a brilliant person who suggested it. So we think, and the research tells us, that children learn better when they're active, not passive, when they're engaged and not distracted, when the stuff that they're learning is meaningful to them and links to their communities, to their experiences, and to their values, when the materials make them think about their own lives. This is a finding in cognitive psychology that's only been around for like 50 years. That's when they learn best, when it's social and they can work with others, although surely we can learn individually. But kids especially learn so much better when there's social stuff going on, and when the materials can be approached from many different points of view. We use a fancy word for that, iterative, so that they can keep coming back and getting new things out of the materials. And lastly, something, Ryan, that may shock you, so I hope you're sitting down. We want learning to be joyful.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, really. We don't want kids moaning and groaning that they have to go to school, and they're moaning and groaning because they have to sit for hours and hours and listen to the sage on the stage, because that's what teachers have been reduced to. In many school districts, teachers have to be on page 11 on Tuesday, or they get in trouble. And that's not why people went into teaching. And that's related to why so many teachers leave the profession.
So it's kind of interesting, Roberta, that you're saying we can have curricular goals and still pedagogically teach in a way that doesn't have people sitting there all the time and being passive all the time. And you know what's interesting to me is that 5 states now have passed laws saying that at least in kindergarten, and we think we should push it up, right, Roberta?
Of course.
5 states are now mandating playful learning. And I wondered if you could just take a minute to suggest, what does that look like, which I think is one of the questions Ryan asked.
In our own research and the work of others, there's a concept we use called guided play. So guided play is pretty key for us because it means in school that the teacher has a curricular goal in mind, but figures out how to set it up so that kids want to understand the stuff that's under discussion, and kids want to master and ask questions about that material, as opposed to just sitting doing a worksheet or learning about it in a passive way. So after 50 years of psychological research, the woman on the other side of this call and I created a set of principles for how children learn best. Now, we didn't create them from scratch. It's not like we met and said, Kathy, what should we include on this list? No, we're scientists.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of papers.
Exactly. And from those papers, we extracted these principles of learning that I've just gone through. And it turns out that classrooms that are organized according to these principles, which encourage children to be active, to be social, to be interactive and learning with their peers, all this kind of stuff, makes kids happier, makes teachers want to stay in the profession, Kathy. That's amazing to me, because they feel like they're there doing what they were trained to do. They want to help children enjoy themselves and learn. And kids learn more when we use those principles.
I wanted to give you an example, Ryan, just so it makes it super clear. What does this look like? In a first grade class in the Westchester Public Schools, there was a teacher who had a really good idea. She wanted to teach kids story structure, which is then going to feed into how kids learn to write. And so she painted the back of wooden spoons. You can see it. This is not expensive, right? And she painted them so that they would go along with particular fairy tales. So you could pick up one for Red Riding Hood or the Three Little Bears or whatever. So I went and watched these kids, and they're picking out their spoons, and they said, would I play audience? And I said, absolutely, can't wait to hear your story. I figured they were just going to give one of the fairy tales. But somehow they mixed up a lot of the things. They took the characters, made their own story from the Three Bears and Little Red Riding Hood. And I said to them, wow, what an interesting story. Now, the story still had a character, it had a setting, it had a conflict, it has a resolution. So they learned narrative structure. And afterwards, I said to them, that was so cool. How did you figure out how to do those things together? And one little boy looks at me so seriously, and he said, I created a mashup. So you can see they really do learn. And we're now doing playful learning. We're calling it active playful learning. And people can go to the website, activeplayfullearning.com, and see an amazing team from around the country that is designing manuals and pedagogical approaches and workshops. We're working in 4 states, courtesy of the Lego Foundation, to help bring active playful learning to schools all over so that they can see firsthand what it is like to have joyful teaching and deeper learning.
You've done a lot of amazing work to bring active playful learning out of the classroom too. Can you tell us a little bit about your work bringing playful learning to all the places where kids and families already are, whether it's a bus stop or a grocery store or a laundromat?
One of the things that you should think of is that people have to go to supermarkets, although they can order their food online, but typically people are still going to supermarkets, and there are many people who are still taking buses, especially in urban areas. And we asked, why does a bus stop have to be just a bench or just a shelter with nothing going on in one of those places? So now you have to picture me with my hands in front of me, scrolling on my make-believe phone, okay? That's what parents do, because there's nothing there to entertain their kids or to invite them to have a conversation with their kids. So we thought, what if we could put fun things in a bus shelter or on a bench? Why, if the municipalities around the world have to buy these things anyway, why not make them family friendly? Now, this is with alongside the community. Don't think of us as just going in and doing what we want. No. It's always in concert with the community. So, for example, at what was a very boring bus stop in Philadelphia, in a poor neighborhood, we put something in called Urban Thinkscapes. And the community said if we were going to put in a puzzle, those kind of puzzles that are vertical and they have 4 sides to each wooden piece that you can rotate, we said, what do you want on the puzzle? Well, Martin Luther King and the name of their neighborhood. So that's what went on the puzzle. And they were thrilled to have the input, and they were thrilled to have us come and make this corner into a living and learning place.
So now all over the world, Ryan, we have created, with community help and community input, we say, what places do you care about? In Santa Ana, California, they said, well, this is the bus stop that we'd like to change, and we want it to look like a game we brought from Mexico called Loteria. And so now we're putting a big Loteria board up in a bus stop, and it's supposed to be installed in the next couple months. At libraries, we went into libraries and made them playbraries. What happened? Parents put their phones down. The kids started to engage more with books and with each other. And the parents all started to go get library cards.
I love
colleague of ours has put reading and signs into laundromats and studied it. And we have studied each one of these, and it wipes out other data in that we get behavioral changes in these spaces that are intergenerational, that are fun for everyone, that literally build the science into the architectural design, and that change behavior by about 30 to 50%.
And some people may want to know, what does it mean, behavioral changes? What are we talking about? Okay, here's something pretty simple. The research tells us that the conversations we have with our children, not when we just talk at them, with our children, are crucial for their development. In a study we did in supermarkets, is we get people who are with little kids to talk to them more. Now that sounds simple, but it's not always the case when parents and caregivers feel so rushed and they're running around, to get stuff for dinner. Well, we can get them to have little conversations with their kids that can make all the difference for how their children feel and for how they do in school.
So we've gone now from classrooms to bus stops to grocery stores. Before we wrap, I want to take the Kathy and Roberta show to one more place, and that is the virtual world. Because the two of you just published an op-ed in the Hechinger Report about the sort of binary camps that we're seeing now, a split between let's ban tech or let's not ban technology in schools. And this, this comes on the heels of John Haidt's new book about anxiety in young people with some really great research in there. But you write that to ban or not to ban is a false choice. And why? Why is that?
Go ahead, Kath.
Well, we think there's a lot that people are learning by being able to go anywhere and to find any knowledge at their fingertips. So I think you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater was our point here. There is some mixed data, and it really isn't strong data, talking about mental health in teens and telephone use. It's really not that strong. What is strong? If you design tech well, kids can learn from it and do learn from it. And what's what Roberta already mentioned, it's making sure that you build in community beliefs and values so that it's meaningful, add in the active, engaged, meaningful, socially interactive, and then add in the 6 C's as a goal. And Roberta, you might want to just say a little bit about, is a whole lot of tech using these principles?
I have some bad news to report. So we wrote this paper, and then someone named Jenny Rydzewski at the University of Michigan, who is, I would call her a media maven.
Yes.
A media expert, got in touch with us to say, would we work with her and her graduate student, Melissa Meyer, to see if our principles of learning for media were present in the 100 most downloaded apps for little kids. We said, we'd love to. So we worked with them, and what we found out, it's a bad story.
How many of the 100 most downloaded apps
for little kids
were really educational?
15.
No, it was 2. Just as we had these debates over television, and we did.
Oh, yes.
And by the way, many years ago, there was absolutely a lot of people thought we should not have the telephone because it was going to ruin office culture.
Or reading. It would ruin children's eyes.
So I think, what we have to do is ask, how do we craft text and the content in tech so that it really is great for learning, for engaging? Right now, we're not there, but that doesn't mean we can't be there.
You two make science so much fun.
Oh,
you really
that's
do.
Great.
So, Roberta, in a moment, I'm going to have Kathy ask you our sort of closing trademark question that we asked every guest. But before we get there,
yeah.
When Kathy was on this program, as a
Yeah.
guest. Maybe it was a year and a half ago. I asked her, we were talking about you, and I asked, I myself have a collaborator, co-author, Greg Bear.
Yes.
And I asked Kathy, what is the secret to such a productive and friendly long-term partnership? And I'm curious about what your take is.
Oh, I would have to say honesty and mutual respect.
I think she might have said the same thing. I have to go back and check.
Seriously? We're nice to each other, but we don't let things go by that we disagree with and think could be done better. So we're like each other's conscience. It works well. It works well.
It does. And I would also say, Roberta, that we've been playing together for a long time, and I think it really helps,
It does. It does. It does.
So, Roberta, there's a question that I hear Greg Bear always asks at the end of every podcast, and I get to ask it of you. Are you ready?
I'm so excited. Hope I can answer it right.
There's no right and wrong.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Here's the question. You ready?
Okay, yeah.
What's one thing that listeners can do today to make tomorrow a more promising place for every learner?
They can play with their child. Now, I think there are lots of parents who feel quite stressed and who think, I can't stop everything and play with my kid. I got to do the laundry. I got to make dinner. Of course, we've both been there. Between us, we have 5 children and 2 husbands, right?
And grandchildren.
And now we have grandchildren, yes. And all you have to do is incorporate the child in your activities. You're going to set the table for dinner. You ask them to help. And how many people are going to be present, right?
That's math.
Right. And then they have to pick out the corresponding number of silverware pieces from the drawer. You ask them, what kind of groups should we make with the laundry? How should we organize them? When we fold, right, the kid's going to come up with the idea to put them into different piles. And then you even say, within this pile, how should we organize them? Where should we put the pants? What should we do? You're helping your child with something called classification. So you can do your job and you can have your kid alongside you engaging in, this is a great example of playful learning. And if you take 10 minutes, I'm serious, set your clock, 10 minutes, sit on the floor with your child and play. I have had people tell me, I forgot how to play. What do I do? All you have to do is sit down and start describing what your child is doing. They love that. And then once you get into it, follow the child's lead. Don't take over. You'll shut down the play. And if the child tells you you're going to be the grocer, you be the grocer, right? And that's how it starts.
We are so grateful to Roberta Golinkoff, who joins us today from her office at the University of Delaware. Our listeners didn't hear this, but before we started recording, she was literally eating candy just to stay awake through all this. And even in her jet-lagged, sleep-deprived state, she continues, along with her collaborator, Kathy Hirsh-Pasek, to be becoming brilliant. Thank you so much for being here, Roberta. We're so grateful. We're so grateful for your time.
So much fun. I hope you invite me again. It was so much fun.
Remaking Tomorrow is powered by Remake Learning. Learn more at remakelearning.org.